I don't know if we all realize how lucky we are to be in an encounter, in a dialogue about migrants and refugees, and not be talking statistics and crisis and all sorts of not only concepts but images which paralyze us because it seems so impossible and so even so frightening. So even to be able to talk about this positively together is itself a miracle, and that's, I think, a good sign of the health of this program and proposal. And it's true that COVID has caused enormous suffering and upset and damage, and we have yet to learn really what it's going to mean to live with COVID from now on. But in a strange way, as we were locked down and locked in, somehow I have a feeling that many of us were also brought out of ourselves. I think people discovered some things about what makes life worthwhile. And many of those things, in fact, are what we have mentioned in the course of this dialogue. And I don't think the word profit or consumption or international tourism came up at all, things that used to maybe occupy many of our minds, but instead compassion and welcome and sharing of life. So I know it's idealistic, but I'm hoping that COVID will shock us into becoming more welcoming and more human, and therefore, as Pope Francis invites us, also to take better care, not only of our brothers and sisters, but also of our common home, because all of that goes together. I wasn't planning on this, but since others have spoken about early experiences, I realized that more than 30 years before Canada invented the sponsorship program, my brother, younger brother, and parents were stuck in Europe. We couldn't go back to Czechoslovakia, and we had no place to go. And a high school chum of theirs, of my parents, who had just arrived in Canada 2 years earlier with his wife and young son, had the courage to guarantee us, which is an old word for sponsorship, or an old word for a part of sponsorship. They had to take responsibility for us in case we didn't work out, so that we wouldn't be a burden on the state. And it was with their signature and their support that we were able to come to Canada in 1949. So I feel like I'm a well over 70-year-old product also of the sponsorship program in a other form, and therefore would like to testify that it's a very good idea indeed, because I don't know where or if I would be speaking with you tonight if it weren't for that. Pope Francis often speaks of the Good Samaritan. This is, you can think of him as a kind of a traveling salesman who showed himself to be a true neighbor. We could now say a true sponsor. Why? Because he offered concrete hope. And this is one of the things that Pope Francis, I think, has made clear, not only with his words, but also with his gestures, that when you want to give someone hope, words won't do. Cheerful slogans won't do. Optimism won't do. Instead, what you need to show is a fighting spirit, willing to take up that person or that family's or that community's needs and to hang in with them towards the goal. And I think that's another way of understanding sponsorship. It's not a cheering society. It's a hanging in society. It's and it grows because it is doing something so well. And a few years ago, when he was especially moved to promote the cause of refugees, Pope Francis appealed in a very concrete way to all the parishes, religious communities, monasteries, and shrines of Europe. And he said I want each of you to host one family. And he said, I'll begin with my own diocese of Rome. And indeed, Rome, the Diocese of Rome, of which he is the bishop, sponsored some refugee families from Syria. whom he met on Lesbos. The beautiful part of the story is that 2 years later, he himself was visiting the University of Rome for an encounter with students. And one of the spokespeople of the group, one of the students who was chosen to speak, began to speak. And as he was listening, he said, this person seems a bit familiar to me. Can I have met her before? And it turns out that she was indeed one of the people that he sponsored himself, and who she was now finishing her degree at the University of Rome and was preparing for a career, I think, in one of the sciences. So it's not just ideas or theories; it's praxis. And I doubt that we have reached the quota of one family per parish, community, monastery, or shrine. But I hope that with some of the encouraging things that were said by the European speakers so far, that it'll be possible to sponsor more families here in Europe. Uh, I can't add very much to the wonderful things that have been said because they are the right things to do, and experience is proving that they are the right things to do. So let me leave you with two kind of questions that I have in my mind. One of them comes from an experience I had on the Guatemala-Mexico border a couple of years ago, speaking with the parish community there that was itself doing so much difficult work in helping the very vulnerable people on that border, which now include not only is questions of dealing with their poverty and their needs, but also with some very aggressive attitudes from authorities and also gangs and organized crime. So the dangers cannot be exaggerated. And in the course of that visit, I had the chance to meet someone from a family who described what they did for some refugees who had come across from Guatemala into Mexico. And being a Canadian, when they finished their second or third paragraph of description, I thought to myself, well, they're sponsoring. What are they doing? They're sponsoring. So these are these utterly poor local people who are sponsoring refugees who are coming over. And so I ask myself, and if I may, I even challenge us, all of us around this wonderful, huge table, could we not help poor people to sponsor, rather than only think that sponsorship can be to bring them from lands of extreme poverty to the relative prosperity of our countries? Or could we not help them to sponsor? I think as soon as I mention it, you can immediately begin to think of the potential of a program that would help people in border areas, or not even border areas, but in countries that we usually think of as refugee producing or displaced producing countries, to turn around and do for their own poor people what we are so happy to do for the ones who come to us. I think it's not only a good idea, there's a kind of a justice to it too, that if we have this good idea underway among us, then we should also make it possible for others to do the same. And the second, and perhaps more difficult thing, is whether we shouldn't also take a second look at other vulnerable people among us who need something like sponsorship. And if I could take one category that has been made more visible, thank God, by the COVID crisis, it's vulnerable seasonal farm workers. These are poor, displaced people among us, and I suppose the word us covers most of the countries that are around this table. And nobody is thinking about sponsoring them, but maybe we should. Maybe we need to see how some of the same very good ideas that we've been having for people from far away, and that has its own attraction and so on, whether some of that couldn't apply to people among us who need to be, as Pope Francis would say, they need to be welcomed, They need to be protected, they need to be promoted, and they need to be integrated. This is his fourfold formula for what our whole enterprise is all about. And I think maybe we could find ways of doing that for the people who, at least here in Italy, they're beginning to point out, if we weren't here, you don't eat. But that doesn't translate um, into dignity, rights, and services that they deserve.